Long ago, before the great cities of classical Greece rose to glory, there was a family, one that seemed cursed from the very beginning. The House of Atreus wasn't just a royal line, it was a name tied to betrayal, murder, and revenge. The kind of stories that didn't just entertain the ancient Greeks, they haunted them. This family, they believed, was stained by a curse so deep that no amount of gold or power could wash it away. It all started with a man named Tantalus, the supposed founder of the line. He wasn't just rich or powerful, he was chosen by the gods. They invited him to their banquets, trusted him, even treated him as one of their own. But that wasn't enough for Tantalus. In a moment of twisted pride or madness, he committed an unthinkable act. He invited the gods to a feast and served them the flesh of his own son, Pelops. It was a test. Tantalus wanted to see if the gods were really all-knowing, but it backfired horribly. The gods were outraged, all except one, Demeter, who, distracted by grief, ate a piece of the boy's shoulder. The gods punished Tantalus. He was sent to the underworld, trapped in a pool of water he could never drink, with fruit hanging just out of reach. A hunger and thirst that would last for eternity. But the real horror was just beginning, because Pelops was brought back to life. The gods reassembled him, replacing the missing shoulder with one made of ivory. He lived again, but something had changed. That terrible act, it left a shadow. The curse had been set in motion, and it would pass on, through generations. Pelops may have been given a second chance at life, but that didn't make him a hero. In fact, what he did next would deepen the curse. As he grew into a man, Pelops set his sights on a prize, the hand of Iphigenia, the daughter of King Menelaus. But the king wasn't about to let his daughter go so easily. He challenged each suitor to a deadly chariot race, and every one of them lost their lives trying. Pelops had a plan, a dark one. He bribed the king's charioteer, Menelaus, to sabotage the chariot, swearing he'd reward him for his help. The trap worked. Menelaus crashed and died. Pelops won the race, won the girl, and then, instead of keeping his promise, he threw Menelaus off a cliff. As he fell, Menelaus cursed Pelops and his entire bloodline, and with that, the curse dug even deeper into the family's future. Pelops and Iphigenia had children, two of them named Atreus and Thyestes, and the rivalry between them would soon erupt into something even darker. This wasn't just a bad family feud. This was the kind of grudge that turned brothers into monsters. Atreus and Thyestes, two brothers, born into a cursed family and destined to turn against each other. After their father Pelops died, the throne of Mycenae was up for grabs. Atreus claimed it, but Thyestes had other plans. He seduced Atreus's wife and stole a sacred golden ram, a symbol of divine favor and rightful rule. Atreus was humiliated, but he didn't just want revenge. He wanted to crush his brother's soul. He pretended to forgive him, invited him to a grand feast, welcomed him like a brother. But the food on the table wasn't just meat and wine. Unbeknownst to Thyestes, he was eating his own sons. Atreus had them killed, cooked, served. When the truth was revealed, Thyestes was broken, a man robbed of his children, his dignity, and his future. He fled, cursing at Atreus with a hatred deeper than any brotherly feud could ever explain. And the gods, they didn't stop any of it, because this wasn't just punishment anymore. It was tradition. One generation after another, consumed by betrayal, murder, and vengeance. And the worst was still to come. Years passed, and the kingdom of Mycenae thrived under Atreus, but the curse didn't sleep. It simply waited for the next to carry its weight. That would be Agamemnon, son of Atreus. Ambitious, powerful, destined for greatness. He became king after his father and married Clytemnestra, daughter of Sparta. Together, they had children, a family, a kingdom, a future. But then came the Trojan War. When Helen, Clytemnestra's sister, was taken to Troy, Agamemnon answered the call to war. The Greek forces gathered, their ships ready, but the winds didn't blow. Days turned into weeks, and the soldiers began to grumble. Morale dropped. The seer Calchas offered a terrible solution. Agamemnon had angered the goddess Artemis. The only way to appease her was to sacrifice something precious, something irreplaceable, his own daughter, Iphigenia. The king hesitated, torn between duty and blood, but in the end, he chose the war, chose glory, chose the gods. He lured Iphigenia with the promise of a wedding and killed her on the altar. The winds returned, the ships set sail. But something had changed in Clytemnestra. Grief hardened into hatred, a quiet, boiling rage. Agamemnon left to conquer Troy, unaware that his own house was crumbling behind him, because this curse didn't forget, and it never forgave. For 10 long years, Clytemnestra waited. She wore her crown, played the loyal queen. But in the dark corridors of the palace, her heart burned with fury. The murder of her daughter had hollowed something inside her. What remained wasn't grief, but resolve. While Agamemnon fought in Troy, Clytemnestra ruled Mycenae, not as a widow in waiting, but as a sovereign in her own right. And she wasn't alone. She took a lover, Aeschylus, the son of Thyestes. That same Thyestes who had once been fed his own children by Agamemnon's father. This wasn't just passion, it was vengeance. 2 threads of the same cursed family, woven back together by blood and hatred. Then, one day, the war was over. Troy had fallen. Agamemnon returned. He brought with him spoils of war, gold, fame, and a woman. Cassandra, a Trojan priestess cursed by Apollo to speak true prophecies no one would believe. From the moment they stepped into the palace, Cassandra saw it. The blood in the walls, the death in the air. She warned him, begged him. But Agamemnon didn't listen. He entered the palace like a victor. He was met not with a blade, but a smile. Clytemnestra greeted him as a loving wife, offered a bath to wash away the war. And while he soaked, she took a blade and ended him. Cassandra died next. The curse of Atreus had claimed another, but it didn't end there. It never did. Because in the next room, Agamemnon's children were watching. Agamemnon was gone. Clytemnestra ruled again, this time beside Aeschylus. The murder was done, justified in her eyes. But peace, that never came. Because curses don't die with kings, they live on in their children. Agamemnon and Clytemnestra had a son, Orestes. As a child, he had been whisked away from Mycenae, saved from the bloodbath by loyal hands. But as he grew, so did the truth of what had happened. He learned how his mother had murdered his father, how she now ruled beside the man who helped do it. And Orestes was torn, because justice demanded vengeance, but so did the curse, and he was terrified of becoming part of it. Eventually, the gods made the choice for him. Apollo himself commanded Orestes to return and to avenge his father. The same god who cursed Cassandra now guided her killer's son. And so, Orestes came home. He entered the palace where his father had died, stood before the mother who gave him life, and ended hers, along with Aeschylus. The throne of Mycenae was his. The curse had been answered, but not ended. Because the moment Clytemnestra's body hit the floor, the Erinyes awakened. Ancient spirits of vengeance. They weren't bound by mortal justice. To them, Orestes had done the unforgivable. He killed his own mother, and they followed him, haunted him. drove him into madness. There was no sleep, no rest, just the constant sound of wings and whispers and screams only he could hear. Orestes had tried to stop the curse, but now he was its prisoner. Orestes ran, not from enemies, but from justice itself. The Erinyes, the furies, chased him across lands and seas. They weren't spirits that could be reasoned with. They were older than the Olympian gods, ancient forces of balance, born from blood crimes like his. But Orestes didn't run forever. He made it to Delphi, to the temple of Apollo, the very god who commanded him to kill. And yet, not even Apollo could stop the furies. So Orestes did something no one had done before. He asked the gods to change the law. He begged for a trial, not vengeance, judgment. And in Athens, the goddess Athena answered. She brought together the first court of law, a jury of citizens, to decide his fate. Could a son be forgiven for killing a mother who had murdered his father? It was close. The votes were even. And in the end, it was Athena who cast the deciding vote. Orestes was acquitted. The Furies were furious. But Athena offered them a choice: remain monsters of vengeance, or become something new, protectors of justice, guardians of balance. They agreed, and just like that, the curse of the House of Atreus was broken. At last, after generations of betrayal, murder, and madness, it ended not with another death, but with forgiveness. Orestes went on to rule, to build, to live a life unshackled by the blood of his ancestors. But the story, the curse, it still echoes. Because what happened to the House of Atreus is more than myth. It's a warning, a family consumed by its own past, trapped in an endless cycle of revenge, until one man chose a different path.